officially set the tone for today's discussion, we will begin with a keynote address navigating the next frontier of transformation. This session will provide valuable insight into how leaders can adapt and thrive in an ever-evolving digital landscape. So let's get ready to explore the possibilities of digital transformation together with Gullnaz Baig as our keynote speaker for today. So the introduction is Gullnaz Baig is the executive director of the Angsana Council at Bongs Hill Ventures. She brings over 15 years of leadership experience across the tech and public sector in Asia Pacific. As a former policy and strategy leader at global platforms like Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook, she has a wealth of expertise in trust, safety, and regulatory compliance. Today, she will discuss navigating the next frontier of transformation, highlighting how leaders can drive innovation and growth in this dynamic era. So let's give Gullnaz Baig a warm welcome, and Gullnaz, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Firstly, it's so nice to start a Monday morning with all of you from the region talking about a topic that I find absolutely interesting, but also a topic that is presents a lot of opportunities for the region. And I think if we're in the space of storytelling, this is indeed something that we should all look into as something that will help drive the growth of the region itself. So again, happy Monday, everyone. I hope you had a good weekend. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you to the New in Asia team for having me. I may not take the whole 15 minutes. And if there are questions, feel free to put it in the chat. I'll try and keep my eye out for it and respond as best as I can. I guess to start off this whole keynote itself, I'd like to ask everyone, say yes or no, put a few remarks into the chat. How do you feel about adopting technology? Are you comfortable with it or uncomfortable with it? So if you're comfortable, put a C. If you're uncomfortable, put a U. And you can come from the perspective of being a leader or someone who adopts technology for you. If you are a leader, it would be useful for you to think about it from a perspective of, are you comfortable getting your team to adopt technology? In the meantime, I think someone is unmuted. If everyone could just mute for now, and we can unmute if there's time for Q&A. Thank you. All right, everyone here seems to be relatively comfortable with technology. Now think about, are you comfortable getting your teams to adopt technology in a meaningful way, in a way that can, reduce costs, improve bottom lines, spread the reach of what you're doing, particularly if you're a leader. Are you comfortable, still comfortable? Anyone would change? No? This is an expert team. It looks like we're all experts in this. So that's great, right? Because if you look at the world out there, actually, a lot of research is pointing to the fact that a lot of companies are grappling with how do you put in place technology in a way that makes sense for your company, and instead of simply increasing the costs, it brings about meaningful outcomes. So it may be a short-term cost line in your P&L, but in the longer term, you're expecting it to bring dividends. So most companies are not there yet. So I like how a lot of you are comfortable navigating this. So maybe we should run an expert session for the rest of the community afterwards. Okay, let me try and screen share and go through just a few slides. Initially, I was like, maybe I'm not going to do slides, but I think slides are important for this conversation. Okay, so in the first instance, can you see my screen in terms of slides? Nika, thumbs up if you can see it. Yep, okay. So what I'm going to do in this short keynote is to first provide a macroeconomic condition of the region so that we can understand why we need to think about this in the first place. And then when I'm looking at the rest of the sessions throughout the day, I see that a lot of speakers are going to go into how do you think about putting digital leadership, digital transformation in place in a way that makes sense. and can sustain growth for yourself. So if you look at the region itself, we have been doing well. If you take COVID as a crucial near-term turning point, most countries are recovering or have recovered and are poised to do well economically. Now, we know with the election of Trump and him being inaugurated now, there will be a lot more uncertainty, but still, we're a region that is set up in a way where there are a lot of opportunities for us to.
Sorry, Gulnaz, the screen is not shared completely, so it's only like part of the screen that is shared.
Oh, okay. Let me try again. Because I can't see it from my end. Can you see it now? Yeah, okay. So this is data set. Thankfully, the first slide is not as important. What is more important in this slide? However, for those of you, particularly a lot of you running businesses, what you do see is that when you think about how much value add are we putting in terms of our production of goods and services, that has been declining over time. And what I'm going to try and do today in this short keynote is to point to the fact that if we are able to effectively leverage technology and use it to not necessarily overhaul and completely transform, but value add the things that we do have a real opportunity. Because if we don't, then others are catching up, as you can see in this slide itself. The other thing we need to be really aware of for this region is we have benefited from good demographic outcomes, but what we expect in the near future is we will not continue to benefit from that. So in the past, you do see that we have a young growing population that we can tap into that is highly productive and that keeps us competitive. But in the near future, you can expect working population growth to slow down, particularly in countries like Singapore and Thailand. And then when you look at migration and emigration, you do see that that's also slowing down to a certain extent. So this combination then means, as business leaders, how do you take a step back and think about, with the workforce that I'm expected to have, how can I be as productive as possible? And this is where, again, I would posit or I would claim that effective use of technology will help keep us competitive. Now, in the work that we do at the Angsana Council, we have produced about 2 reports on this. We've developed this term called tech-enabled disruptors. And these are companies and incumbents that you are very familiar with. If I show you the next slide, you will recognize a lot of the logos. They're essentially companies that have meaningfully tapped into technology and have managed to disrupt the ecosystem. Now, let me give you a sample. I'm sure as you look at this, names like Shopee, names like Ninja Van are very familiar to us in this region. Tech-enabled disruptors have adopted this digital transformation in a way where they've even managed to push out incumbent, family-owned, state-supported enterprises within very traditional sectors. So what I'm doing here is trying to make a claim that digital transformation is valuable to us, but it's not a claim based on no grounds. It's a claim where if you look at the ecosystem, you have a lot of proof that if you really tap into technology in a way that makes sense for your business model, you can disrupt entities which have been out there for a long time and benefit from being first movers in their sectors. So this slide, I toyed about whether or not we should have slide, but I think this, of all the slides, is the most important to me because it proves to you that it can be done. And then in the next layer of the slide, the bottom half of the slide, you see that even incumbents have been able to transform the value that they can bring to the sector by meaningfully adopting tech. I think if you're in Indonesia, years ago, everyone would be taking a Bluebird, right? If you landed at the airport in Jakarta, you would be taking a Bluebird. Now there's apps for it. Everything is digitized. It makes it a lot easier if you're a business traveler to just digitize the whole process. So even a traditional brand like that has been changing. And for those of us who are in Singapore, you know that DBS has rolled out a lot of digital services and is now meaningfully thinking about how to tap into AI to offer a different type of service and relationship management with their customers. So when you look at the various service sectors and even manufacturing to a certain extent, yes, I do acknowledge that the services industry have a greater propensity to be disrupted by technology, and I'll talk a bit more about why. But you can see that across various sectors, there are opportunities here. I know this slide is pretty dense. I'm more than happy to share the full report after this presentation. Now I'll stop sharing. So those were a few slides just to jog some thoughts in your mind. But what I really want to talk about is why. Why is digital transformation important, and why do we really need to think about it, right? By 2030, 50% of employment in this region will be from companies which we would define as tech-enabled disruptors. So they're a huge growth driver in terms of employment for the region itself. When you track these companies, you also see that they're about 25% more competitive. Now, if you're expecting to go into the next 4 or 5 years with more headwinds and uncertainty, then as a business leader, as an investor, you really want to think about how can I bolster my defenses so that I can weather these headwinds better. And technology is one way in which you can meaningfully do this. So that's in terms of overall business model itself. But then when we look at the technology itself, you do find yourself at a very interesting juncture of history. We all know the hype around AI. Some people say it's a hype. Some people say there's real value. Certainly, AI is not something that came about overnight. It has been around for years. But what you do see happening at this point in time with a technology like AI is mass adoption, is the entry of AI into popular consciousness. So people are more open to adopting AI. You see then also this technology being met with computing ability, developments in chip technology that allows you to process data at a higher level where you previously could not. And that's why you see this exponential growth of AI development. Just last year, everyone was hyped up with generative AI. This year, the new buzzword is agentic AI. Regardless of how the technology flows, there are real opportunities here for us to think about two things. On the one hand, it's about processes internal to your business. Can I manage change management? Can I improve workflows? Can I bring down the costs? Can I increase efficiency of my workforce? But on another hand, particularly if you are companies or businesses that have a direct line to your customers, the advent of AI in the way that it's progressing at the moment allows you to change or transform your relationship with your customers, consumers, whatever it is that is front-facing. Previously, a cycle would last 8 months, 1 year. You sell something to a customer, they're done with you, they move on to a different platform, they move on to a different business. But AI allows you to build that sort of social relationship with your customer, and you can offer product and services that grows with it. And I mentioned DBS just now, and that's how they're thinking about incorporating AI in terms of developing a 360 relationship management with their customer that grows with the wealth accumulation of their customer itself. And you can see this happening across different sectors. Education, as an individual grows and goes into tertiary education, goes into skills upgrading in the future. If you can develop a service that offers various entry points, tapping into AI to track, to aggregate, to process data, to support the options and the choices that your customer has, you can extend your relationship with the customer itself. So that's the second point, right? The first point is the environment is right for it. The second point is the technology is right for it. And the third point is the people is right for it to a certain extent. The people one is a mixed bag. Now, a very interesting study by McKinsey tracking high achievers within the workforce and their relationship with AI show that up to 70% of high achievers adopt AI on their own. And they do this for more than 2 to 3 aspects of their job. So not just, oh, I'm just using it for content creation. No, they do it for scheduling, they do it for content creation. So there are people who are comfortable navigating different types of AI and customizing it to their own needs. Now, in another study by BCG, tracking now high-performing companies that have adopted AI well, their data set was in reverse. What they find is a lot of the challenges in putting in place AI for the mass of the workforce within the company is to do with people's adoption of technology. So what does this two different study then mean? Because they seem to show very different data sets. On the one hand, if you have a workforce that's very comfortable with like, I'm going to try it out, I'm going to see how it suits and can be customized to my workflow, you get best outcomes. On another hand, you do still need to recognize that the base of your workforce is not yet at that stage. So if you're a business leader, what you should be thinking about is, how do I level this up? How do I ensure that as many of the people I employ come into a position where they're comfortable trying things out and figuring out how AI can be customized for their need? So I brought you through three different aspects of why digital transformation is not just important, but the time is also right for it. And as a result of that, I think today, as business leaders, we really need to think about how do we tap into a technology that is out there because it's out there. And if we're not thinking about it, someone else is going to be thinking about it. To really make sense of the world, to really make sense of how our businesses can thrive and transform for the new world. So that's the end of my presentation. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take because I think Andrew just messaged we can have 1 or 2 more minutes. So if there's anyone with any dying question, feel free to ask. I'm more than happy to share my thoughts.
You can text us in the chat box so that Gullnaz will answer your question.
I'd like to ask this question. If there's one thing that a company must do to adopt AI into their business strategy, what would that be?
This one is difficult because it needs to be pretty specific to the company itself. But I think if I take a step back and look at it from a people management point of view, it's about allowing folks the space to try. So this then means that as a business leader, there is a period of messiness that you perhaps need to be willing to consider. So you need to perhaps give short-term losses in perhaps productivity for longer term gain. So that needs to be put in place, but you also need to think about facilitating that process. Give the tools that are available, you need to offer a suite of them, and allow people to try, share best practices of what's working and what's not working. And as a business leader, probably use data quite actively to track outcomes. I think there's one more question. Let me check.
I think
What
the question
advice
is,
would you give? What key points to listen for in today's webinar? I don't know. I think listen to everything. I don't know. I think halfway through the day, probably everyone will need a break. But looking at the slew of speakers, it's very different sectors and aspects of it. One other interesting point that was brought up in this BCG study on AI adoption in companies was a lot of companies tend to focus on the risks. So how do you put risk and safety in place? How do you manage data flow in a way that is good? But they don't do enough in terms of thinking about the opportunity side of things. Here's all the different ways in which you can use it. Let's experiment and try, as long as we're not breaking stuff and we're still in compliance. So I think as much as you're listening to, what possible risks are there, I would lean more into, how have others adopted it? And can I try that out for my business entity? Does it make sense for me? That's what I would lean into. Janine says, Seems like embracing AI is key. How can leaders bring their workforce up to speed and do capacity building with their teams? And how can we keep up ourselves? I think the nature of the technology and the fast-paced manner in which things are developing means that there's a lot of trial and error. Actually, when you look at the study on the high performance, they were just people who were very comfortable just playing around with things and seeing what works and what doesn't work. Now, that does not come naturally for all the folks we have employed. So I guess as a business leader, you need to think about creating, it's almost like kids, right? Creating little playgrounds or little projects where like this project, if I said, on top of solving it, can you leverage technology to solve it? Or how would you think about it? Create opportunities for them to hone the skills of using different types of technology to solve problems. So you're almost pushing your whole workforce to become problem solvers rather than, process chasers, which is not easy. Do you see? Do I see greater potential within specific industry than others? Definitely in the slide just now, you see that tech-enabled disruptors, the opportunities are higher in customer-facing and environments where it's things like consumer and retail, education, transport and logistic, and financial services. So there's a lot more opportunity there, because for that, it's not just about bringing costs down, it's also about increasing relationship with customer and improving value creation. So yeah, those kind of sectors. And I think with that, our time's up. It's been great. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I'm happy to send the links to the reports over. And also, please connect. I'm happy to answer further questions after this. Thank you for having me.